Chinese by blood, Filipino by heart, #Roots is brought to you by Dash Cargo, propelling possibilities. BA Securities, your trading partner in Asia Pacific.
Have to feel that struggle na parang where do you belong, because that's how I felt for the longest time na parang I don't belong in one place, but I realized that when we look at the other side of things, why don't you feel like you belong in all the places instead? And that's how I see things now. Right now I feel like I am someone that belongs in all these different places because of who I am, because all of that places makes me who I am too. Third generation Chinese Filipino, where I was born in the Philippines, but the only difference is I was raised in Hong Kong. I was, I guess, taken to Hong Kong when I was just 1 month old. So I spent 18 years of my life in Hong Kong before moving back to the Philippines and to study here initially. My parents are very typical Chinese Filipino, where they're very focused on business. I was groomed to be a businessman. I remember when I was like around 8 years old, 9 years old, my mom would teach me how to write checks already. I would always be at the office. They would always introduce me to some of our team, our staff, and kind of like basically just to give me a feel on how it is like to be in an office and make me feel like it's, I guess, home, kumbaga also. And so yeah, being raised in Hong Kong and also Hong Kong being a financial center of everything, it feels like that was my destiny. That was the goal that I was supposed to go to. And all my life, growing up, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I feel like it was in the blood for me, kumbaga din. And I guess one thing led to another, still brought me to the Philippines, where things completely changed out here for me. So I speak 5 different languages. It's Cantonese, where I learned in Hong Kong. Mandarin, I learned in school. Hokkien, where I learned at home, because I speak that at home. And a lot of people always say that, hey, Richard, that's all just Chinese, they're dialects. But the truth is, in linguistics, the way you define a language is when it's mutually unintelligible. Meaning, if you never learned that language, you won't understand the other person.
Cantonese, you say, 哇，你肥咗喎. In Mandarin, you say, 哇，你胖了很多誒. In Hokkien, you say, 哇，你肥啲啦. Well, and not to mention all the different accents.
Besides that, so I also speak English, I also speak Tagalog, syempre. And actually growing up in middle school, I actually learned French too, but it's like 15 years ago already, so I can't speak that anymore. And I tried learning Korean during the pandemic. I have a lot of friends who are from Hong Kong, and they're Chinese, so I learned Cantonese with them. And I always say, like, I don't know what my brain thinks in, or what I dream in, because usually people ask you what your first language is or what's your most natural language. They always ask you, what language do you dream in? But the language that I dream in is actually a mix of all 5 of them. So I guess it's my own Richard language. I don't know.
Growing up, I was talking to my ama in Hokkien already kasi hindi niya kaya magsalita ng Tagalog nor English. After that, I was conversing with my parents in Hokkien also, up until now naman din. And kung in terms of turo, hindi naman siya formally na tinuro sa amin. It's just that since every day, yun yung usap ko sa kanila, natutunan ko na rin yung language itself. So yung father ko mentioned that habang bata, kailangan matuto kang makipag-usap in Hokkien. And because this is the language that we are using in our community. So it sort of connects you to the person you're talking to. Very important na when you're doing business or any relationship for that matter, you're able to connect with the person. And so bata pa lang na sinasabi nila, we're forced to talk to them in Hokkien. And in fact, nakakatuwa dyan is even the parents of my friends then is telling us we have to talk in Hokkien. Kahit bata pa lang kami noon. So, for us, no, hindi siya weird or hindi siya awkward pag nag-uusap kami in Hokkien. So, kahit nang magbagan, maglalaro kami, well, we drop from time to time na mga Hokkien. And growing up, no, since ganun yung ginagawa namin, yung practice namin, we realized that we are able to switch from one language to another effortlessly. So yun yung kagandahan, no? Habang bata pa lang, nag-aaral na ng iba-ibang language. And we become, yung brain, the brain actually, no? we call that code switching. The brain's able to adapt to different kinds of languages. And growing up, it's not harder to learn another language because we're used to learning that. We're used to learning or speaking several languages at any given time.
We're still in the generation where we still hear Hokkien, we still speak a little Hokkien. So what will ensure that it is still spoken? For me, the answer is very simple, the family. You know, sometimes here in school, parents will say, oh, you should teach Hokkien in school. If there's no environment for speaking Hokkien, they're not going to pick it up. It's the same with Mandarin. Mandarin, it's even simpler because there's simply no environment for speaking Mandarin. But Hokkien, there could be an environment for speaking it. And that's the family. So, to be fair, I have met students in our school and in other schools who speak excellent Hokkien. And when you probe a little bit, the reason for that is very simple, because they speak it at home. And that's true for local Chinese, that's true for mainland Chinese, the newer waves, the younger immigrants. They're so fluent in Hokkien and Mandarin and English and Tagalog because that's the world, the language, the linguistic world in which they live. So I think family is the key component there. In Hong Kong, kasi we're K-12, so by the time na 17, 18, we're looking already at college and universities and where we go. So one of the options that was presented by my dad was, do you want to go to the Philippines? Because he's from UP, and that was honestly for me, like it was UP or nothing. And during that time, like I said, my mind was all about doing business. So my dad was like, if you're gonna do business in the Philippines, you have to know the people. So what's the best way to learn? And what's the best way to meet people is to be in school, in UP or wherever it is. So that's how it started. So I was like, you know what? Do I want to go to the States where it's miles away, or go to the Philippines where it may be a little bit more comfortable and closer to family at least? Because, you know, here in the Philippines, I live with my lolo, and like if I go to the US, it's so far, I have to pay for rent, I have to cook, and etc. etc. So it wasn't a no-brainer, to be honest. So I was like, I come here for a year, if I don't like it, I can always still go to somewhere else. And I always I always say this, like it's honestly the best decision I've ever made in my life, because it brought me to where I am right now. And you know, like I said, I'm still trying to find my place in this world.
Chinese by blood, Filipino by heart. #Roots is brought to you by Landlight, your total lighting solution. Poland Hopia. Chinese General Hospital and Medical Center, exceptional care within reach. AgriPro Premier Nutrition Inc. GAOC. Hilton Manila. Jimmy C. Chua Beng Tang. Nation Paper Products and Printing Corporation. Japan Parts Trading Center. Alejandro Co. Global Diesel and GU Engineering. Enrique Chua. Sherwin Choi. Albert Ko. Jersey Haven. Veco Paper. Water Care. PG Flex Linoleum and Maruyama Tarpaulin. Ford Tractor Philippines, your long-term agriculture partner. Tony D. William Goshako. Chinese by blood, Filipino by heart.
I remember my first 6 months siguro in the Philippines, my first semester in the Philippines, in UP, it was a huge cultural change. Na parang, kasi syempre in Hong Kong, I'm so used to public transport being so convenient, so easy. I can get from one place to the other place easy, no problem. Train lang or take the bus, and I'll just be there in like 30 minutes. But I remember my first semester, it was so hard because I lived in Paranaque, and UP was in Quezon City, so it was so far that that's why I had to stay at my aunt's place for a couple of months, and I enjoyed it. You know, I was very lucky that my aunt offered her place for me to stay at, so it's a lot easier to go to school. But going to school there, I had to commute through the jeep and all that. Again, it's different. You know, it's different compared to what it was in Hong Kong. So it was a huge cultural change, and I think that honestly humbled me down in a way. I did feel a bit alienated in a way that I didn't feel that I belonged, in a sense. Yes, although I'm Filipino Chinese, pero I grew up in Hong Kong, so culturally speaking, I'm very different in that sense. I don't understand their humor. I don't understand the stuff that, they grew up with, kasi the culture. They grew up in a Filipino culture, very Filipino culture. I grew up in Hong Kong where the culture there is very Hong Kong Chinese. So there's that disconnect. I always feel that they're looking at me differently. They know that the aura that I give out is different. Na parang like I'm an exchange student more than I am a Phil Chai. Because like if you're looking at Phil Chai, you know right away that this person's Phil Chai. But for some reason, I just don't exude that aura. Kumbaga, like they knew right away that I'm not from here. So yeah, it did feel a bit. I did feel a bit alienated to a certain extent. But I think ultimately, once I lived here a lot more and talked to more people and learned to speak Tagalog better, and I mean even now when I speak English, my friends in Hong Kong always make fun of me. But I'm like, oh Richard, you don't speak like how you used to. You have like a Filipino accent in some of the words that you say. So I right now, after so many years here in the Philippines, 12 years now dito technically. So it's becoming part of me, and I think most people still see me as as a quote-unquote foreigner, but at the same time, when I start speaking, when I start talking to them about different topics about the Philippines, they'll be able to be like, ito, Pinoy pala to. I wish people are more open-minded in a way to accept that hindi naman lahat dapat a particular look, then that's the only way to define what a Filipino is. Like, Filipinos nowadays, even CHiNOYs, like Filipino Chinese, a lot of us actually are more Filipino than Chinese to a certain extent. So, for us, we're lucky enough to be accepted, to be able to accept or be able to experience both types of cultures. I mean, sure, we don't have to be halfies. Like, it doesn't have to be a halfie in order to be seen as 100% Filipino, 100% whatever that other country is.
If you belong to more than one culture, there will always be that accusation, you're not being Filipino enough. But the other side is, sasabihin din naman kami na you're not being Chinese enough. You're too Filipino, you're too Western. So it goes both ways. I think we're richer though by acknowledging that we belong to more than one culture, that we know more than one language, and that our being Filipino is not measured by the number of languages we speak. No, we can speak Filipino anytime. And our loyalty to this country cannot be questioned.
In Hong Kong, so a lot of my friends are white people. A lot of are very Americanized, and Chinese also. In the Philippines, again, completely different background. From UP, you have people that are from the provinces. You have people from Metro Manila. It's like a whole melting pot of the Philippines. And that for me was such a different experience also, to be able to really understand the other side of the world. Na parang not everything is just in this little bubble that I used to live in, which is the people in Hong Kong. Na, we're privileged. We're privileged. So it was a huge change, and I was able to, I guess, take the opportunity to really learn and understand the different side of the world. I remember like growing up, my parents would use Tagalog with our helper at home and all that, but like never never made us learn the language because it was never seen to be something that we need. But we would understand words here and there, like, kain, those basic stuff. But we never truly learned it. So moving to the Philippines, especially going to UP, like, I remember when I moved to the Philippines, I had 1 month lang yata na at home lang, and then school na agad. So I did not expect that UP would all be fully Tagalog on all that, and I didn't know that. I mean, again, my dad didn't brief me about what to expect in UP, so I just jumped in. I was like, oh my god, like, as in, a lot of people are speaking a language that I don't truly 100% understand what they're talking about. So I had to kind of force myself to learn the language. I remember I had classes where the professor had told me, na, hey, Richard, you need to learn Tagalog because you're in the Philippines, you're in UP, this is a government-funded school, you learn our language here. And I was like, what do you mean our language? I'm technically Filipino also, which again, like I said, I don't blame people saying that, but like, you don't see me as a Filipino because on my exterior, I don't look Filipino. And it's something that I feel has to be, I don't want to has, I don't, doesn't mean it has to be changed, but it can be adjusted to a certain extent. Because like, for example, in the US, there are a lot of Asian Americans. And there's always that stigma of, oh, Asians are not supposed to be, Americans should be white and all that. And I think we live in a world now it's a melting pot of everything. Like everyone from every country can freely fly to this country, live there, and become a citizen there. What does it mean to be a certain person? What to be a certain nationality? So those things frustrate me. But anyways, point I'm trying to say here is, ultimately, how do you define being a Filipino is more of so many different parts in it. It's not just the blood. And in the Philippines, I know a lot of people in general, especially mass people, believe that if you have Filipino blood, that's when you're defined as a Filipino. But there's so much more than being a Filipino than just by blood. So when it comes to culture, I would say I am what we call a third culture kid. Usually for third culture kid is defined as parang kids who don't know where they belong in terms of culture. And I feel like I'm this usually is for mga IS kids because their family moves around a lot, so they get to expose to a lot of different cultures. So for me naman, again, I sometimes don't really know how to define what culture I am, and I just decide to embrace everything together instead. Because again, I have Filipino background in me. My parents grew up here. My parents uphold very strong Filipino values also, but I'm like, always wanting to be together, always believe that family first and all that. And then for Chinese culture naman, my parents are very feng shui, very auspicious. They believe in those type of energy also. And in Hong Kong naman, the Hong Kong Chinese side naman, then we have very different way of thinking compared to, like, say, the Hokkien Chinese. And not to mention, I went to international school, so I have friends who are very Western. So some of parts of my ideologies are very Western also. So I feel like I'm a melting pot of like different cultures around the world, and I think that's what the world's going to be like. I mean, there are a lot more multi-race, inter-race relationships, marriages, kids who are half this, half that, quarter this, quarter that. Even in the Philippines. So I think it's a trend that's happening, and we live in a world where we're supposed to just not think of us as individual races, but more of like a collective human race. In showbiz is where things are a little bit different because there's only so much or so many roles that you can play in showbiz that looks like this, and there's only so many of them. Kaya there's not much, I guess, hindi siya convincing kumbaga if, let's say, Richard's going to play a role that's half Filipino, half Chinese, because my looks are just not for it. So I think that my peers kind of see that in a way na parang like, it's accepted that Richard's like this and that's how he is. And it's not, I mean, siguro before at start, medyo alangan din na parang like, word, like, Pinoy ba to? Like, parang ganun, because they never know who I am. It warms my heart, it warms my heart that I have people come up to me and say that. And sometimes on my Instagram, or DMs in that, and I would click and see, parang like they would say, thank you, Richard, for, being also a CHiNOY that represents something in this industry. And it's funny, because like you said, there are a couple of people out there, but I don't think there are a lot of them that are, similar age as mine. I guess for the longest time, I've always questioned, like, where do I position myself? Like, am I? Because like for example, like in the industry, I'm always not seen as ano naman talaga like Filipino, and I always feel like there's a glass ceiling for me when it comes to whatever I do in this entertainment industry, because I can never be put in, let's say, a role of someone that's half Filipino or half Chinese, because like apparently I look too Chinese or apparently I look too un-Filipino. So that's something that I've understood and given up on that already, and hence why I always be like, so saan ba talaga ako dapat, put myself. And I think I just, in a sense, just accepted na parang like I can be fully I just feel like I fully accept myself as 100% Chinese, but also 100% Filipino. And whether or not other people agree with me, so be it. As long as I know what I believe in myself and what I feel for myself, I think that's more than enough. I'm lucky to have all these different cultures in me because I understand a lot of different sides of these different cultures. It makes me realize that I'm like, okay, the Chinese think like this, the Filipinos think like this, because that's how it is. And I learned to be a little bit more accepting and be more understanding in different situations in life. And that is what empowered me to be able to I guess to a certain extent, make some change and make a stance about a lot of things, because I tend to be more understanding being exposed to so many different cultures.
Chinese by blood, Filipino by heart, #roots is brought to you by Sonalika, India's #1 tractor exporter by Go Tractora. Real Estate Hub. Agri Pro, Premier Nutrition Inc. Sky Law. Jimmy C. Chua Beng Teng. Nation Paper Products and Printing Corporation. Japan Parts Trading Center. Alejandro Co. Global Diesel and GU Engineering. Anson Tan. Enrique Chua. Sherwin Choi. Albert Ko. Jersey Haven. Chan Kwan. Thomas Kua. Philflex Wires and Cables. Ford Tractor Philippines, your long-term agriculture partner. Chen Z Xia. Nung Family. Tony D. William Goshako. Chinese by blood, Filipino by heart.
I think language is very important because it's the way that you connect to people, and you connect, being able to speak the language, especially fluently and in the same accent or whatever it is, there's an instant connection right away. Like, I think the best example is I recently just went to a trip in Hong Kong, and it was for business, and they instantly connect with you a lot more if you speak the language.
Personally, it's my advocacy to help spread the learning Hokkien. My generation was I could say, the last generation who can actively speak Hokkien. After that, Yung mga kids ngayon kasi, mostly the reality is they speak in English mostly. And the parents, or even, in fact, the grandparents, no, sila yung may gustong pagpaaralin yung anak nila ng Hokkien. But the thing is, there's no institution, well, there's little institution that offers the language. So this is my advocacy to the community, to help them retain the value and the culture of learning the Hokkien. It's not just learning the language, but when you learn the language, you also learn the culture. When you learn the culture, you learn the traditions, and so it makes the learning or the language richer and more fulfilling.
The language you speak, the culture in which you grow up, that's what you bring to the table when you participate in a global environment, a global collaboration, whatever it is. The richness of your own culture. We should never equate global with Western. Diba? I think that's a key insight that's very important. At a deeper level, if we can manage to retain, preserve our language, it's important because it's part of our identity. Wala namang generic Chinese eh. We're all particular kinds of Chinese. So when we say CHiNOY, what kind of CHiNOY are you? So language is so much a part of that. One of my big takeaways from studying philosophy of language, for example, is that idea that language is the soul of culture. That culture comes out most in the language. Now, of course, you have food, you have customs and traditions, but in language, it's how we express ourselves. It's how we understand the world. It's the words we use to describe food or customs or how we should celebrate life events. It all needs to be expressed in language.
It's a huge advantage in a way that it just makes things so much easier. Like, you understand what they're talking about, you don't need a translator, saves so much time. And I mean, let it be entertainment, let it be business, like, you know, business. I mean, for example, if it's entertainment, so being able to understand that language and the nuances of that language is so important because it's what makes the language beautiful. So being able to understand people and being able to connect with them, especially when you're doing business, makes doing business a lot easier too.
Don't get carried away by Western values and media, and that's what you want to get into. That's okay for entertainment. But in terms of understanding yourself, who you are, your history, your family history, then language and culture are so important. So if it's not yet too late, study Chinese, learn Chinese, and speak Chinese.
Why is it important to learn a language or why to be able to speak well in a language is because you connect with the people right away, and that's what we want. And us humans, you know, we want to connect with people. It's part of our human nature to want to connect, and being able to connect with other people is what makes life beautiful too, I think.
At a very young age, I've always felt like I was destined to do something big. I just didn't know what it was, but I knew that I was going to do something, and I'm just really thankful that I have, you know, my mom always reminding me that I am capable, and this is why she worked so hard to put me in a very good school so that I will be more equipped and more, you know, ready to face any challenges, whatever life may bring.
Chinese by blood, Filipino by heart. #Roots was brought to you by Dash Cargo, propelling possibilities. BA Securities, your trading partner in Asia Pacific.